All right, Brian,
Fine.
let's talk about the presidential race. You and I did a fairly brief show on the debate last week, but we both agreed Kamala Harris clearly won that debate, and it's definitely showing up in the polling now. There wasn't a lot of polling that came out last week, but what has come out, and now the beginning of this week, we're starting to get more, and it's really looking good for Harris. Post-debate polling right now, she is ahead by an average of 2 points, which doesn't sound like much in the Real Clear Politics average, but that's because of some old data that's factored in before the debate. Here are her leads in the polls that were released since the debate on realclearpolitics.com. These are the results. Harris +4, Harris +4, Harris +6, Harris +4, Harris +4, Harris +6, and then there's one outlier, Trump +3. So if you look
Rasmussen?
at no, actually it isn't. It's Atlas Intel, which Nate Silver, who I trust, is kind of like my go-to for polling and forecasting. He actually says it's a pretty highly rated pollster. But look, outliers happen, but the trend is clear that post-debate, Harris is doing well. There was a poll in Pennsylvania that had her up 3, which was huge the other day. She's actually polled well in places like Iowa, where she was only down by 4, and Alaska, where she was only down by 5 in recent days. So it appears clear, at least for now, she's got some momentum. In the betting odds, she's ticked up a little bit. She's now roughly a 53-46 favorite on electionbettingodds.com. And I'll frame it to you this way, because since we've started redoing a second iteration of this podcast this year, you have been consistent that Donald Trump would win. You thought that when Joe Biden was running, even before the debate disaster. You thought it then even after they made the switch to Kamala. But seeing the debate, seeing how the polling is trending right now, do you still feel confident that Donald Trump will win the presidency?
No. This is the first time I'm going to waffle a little bit. I may have overestimated. I think what happened in 2016 was unique. So like let's start there, right? Different time, different place. And my general feeling lately has been, I think people are kind of getting a little tired of Trump and his modus operandi. That doesn't mean he still doesn't have a huge following. It still doesn't mean that, the repeated assassination attempts, which I'm sure we'll get to, those type of things don't matter, because they do. It's funny. I'm seeing less false information online than we saw in 2016. I still see some,
You must not be on X.
Well, you're right. I'm not on X very much, but for the social media I am on, I just feel like people are less enthusiastic about Trump than they were in 2016. And for that reason, and that reason only, I'm wavering for the first time, where I will say that it is pretty clear that Kamala Harris has the lead. Will it be sustained through November? I don't know. I still think it's coin flip-ish. Which is pretty close if you're a Democrat. So I don't think you have it in the bag. It's interesting because Trump had such a commanding lead against Joe Biden. And you and I have talked about this. Had Joe Biden stayed in, I now agree with you that I think Trump would have won almost definitively. But Harris has done well. I mean, can't we just give her some credit and say, the Democrats and the party has come together? Like, that was a pretty cool thing that they all united behind her, like almost simultaneously with very little division, and said, hey, we're going with Kamala. And I mean, good for them. It may win them the election. We'll see. But to answer your question direct, yes, this is the first time I'm wavering since we've talked. And it's for the reason I said. I just feel like the general sense is not the enthusiasm that I saw in 2016. We'll see what happens.
I generally agree with you. I would rather be Harris. I think Harris, if I had to pick, I would pick Harris. But would I feel great about that? No, because there's still 49 days left. A lot can happen. And we'll see if this is a temporary bounce off of the debate.
Which happens all the time, right?
Right. It happens all the time. Trump sometimes has outperformed polls. Not always, but he has outperformed, like in 2020. So but I think the biggest advantage Trump still has is the Republican edge in the Electoral College. I think Harris is very, very likely to win the popular vote. In fact, I'd be shocked if Trump wins the popular vote.
How about this? 100% chance he wins the popular vote. Like, right. I'm going to guarantee it on this podcast that she wins the popular vote by a significant margin. I think she may win by a larger margin than Joe Biden did. I really do.
That would probably put her in safe territory. I remember, just for context, Hillary beat Trump by 2.1%, and Trump won barely the Electoral College. Biden beat Trump by 4.5%.
I was going to say 4.5.
Biden won, of course, the Electoral College. But if you flip less than 100,000 votes in 3 states, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Georgia, then Trump would have won. So it was much, much closer in the Electoral College than 4.5 points would lead you to believe. So if Harris only wins by, let's say, less than 2, she's probably going to lose the Electoral College.
She's probably going to lose it there.
If she wins by more than 4, she's probably safe. But if you're in that 2 to 4 range, which right now that's where the polling is, that leads you to a toss-up in the Electoral College. So I think your instinct about Trump winning, I think, was a good instinct because of the Electoral College, and also because of what you said in a previous episode, which I think was a really good point, which is because of social media or our attention spans or the algorithms, whatever it is, we flip back and forth so fast. There's an anti-incumbent sentiment that, by the way, isn't just in America. It is all over the world. Every democracy, basically, the governing party is extremely unpopular. I mean, in Great Britain, the Tories just got their ass whipped in an election. In India, their ruling party got crushed. If you see it in election after election, where people all over the world are just uneasy. It's not
they
just
want something
American
better
thing. Right. They want something else. And Trump is something else, right? In many ways. And also in America and around the world, we've had this pretty severe inflation that happened post-COVID.
I was going to get to
all
that.
Together,
that's a huge thing.
And when you put that all together, it leads you to believe this was if you just had a generic Republican and a generic Democrat, that this would be a race that should favor the Republicans just based on those factors. Of course, when you plug the people in, it's a different story.
I said I was wavering, and you hit the nail on the head why I think Trump is still very much alive in this election, and it is the economy. I mean, the wealth disparity has never been what it is now. I mean, in human history, it's fairly amazing in the United States, like the difference between the haves and the have-nots. Kamala keeps talking how she's from a middle-class family. I mean, dude, all kidding aside, that barely exists anymore. I mean, not to be hyperbolic, like I'm serious. The gap between the wealthy and the not wealthy is humongous. And prices, inflation, it does matter. I mean, everybody feels it. And if you're voting on your wallet, it would be very attractive to vote for Trump.
Yeah, which is interesting because as a gut level, you can see it. But I think the problem for Trump and why he hasn't closed the deal is because he is not skilled enough to make the case, and disciplined enough to make the case. But also, when you go to the next step and you say, okay, let's all acknowledge that inflation is up. Let's acknowledge there's an anti-incumbency sentiment. Let's acknowledge people are struggling in certain areas. But now let's talk about the policies going forward. And that is where I think Harris is able to at least fight Trump to a draw, because when you really dig into the policies, Trump's policies generally tend to exacerbate exactly what they're talking about, the income inequality.
I want to be clear. The reality doesn't matter.
Yes. Right. Well, it matters to some people, and it does matter.
But generally speaking, in the margins, it does not matter.
I did see this the other day, and this is interesting because this stat really surprised me. So this is real wages for non-supervisory work, which is what you're talking about. So non-supervisory work is essentially the bottom 80 percentile of the economy. So this is taking out the top 20% of private sector workers. Okay,
yeah, labor.
Bottom 80%.
Yeah, labor.
Of every president since LBJ, Joe Biden has the highest real wage growth of any president. Donald Trump is second, by the way.
Yeah.
Now, that is something that was really surprising to me. And it shows you that that under Biden, the trend that you're talking about actually is kind of reversed a little bit. Not a lot, but for the first time since Reagan, the bottom 80% have actually made gains on the top 20%.
Well, something had to give.
It did, but it's obscured because of the inflation and because of the higher prices that everybody is paying. But I just thought that was interesting because that stat takes into account inflation, by the way, and Biden still had the highs. I just thought that was interesting to throw out there. Okay, let's talk about the assassination attempt, the second one on Donald Trump. It happened Sunday. They arrested the suspect. He's facing some charges now. Will be facing more. I thought one of the more interesting details that came out of the court filings was that he was apparently hiding in the bushes around the Trump golf course in West Palm Beach for 12 hours before he encountered Secret Service. They saw a gun pointing through the fencing around the course, fired at him. He ran and was later caught. Trump was never seriously in danger. But, of course, the fact that it even got that close is really kind of scary. You have a security background, as we've discussed before, Brian. The Secret Service taking a lot of flack here. What are your thoughts about the way that incident unfolded and how they did in terms of securing that area?
Well, I mean, assassination attempts against Trump are now just commonplace, apparently. And all kidding aside, it is pretty scary, man. Whether
Yes.
you agree with someone's policies or politics or not. I was thinking today, Trump is obviously bombastic. He says crazy things. People, whether they're sane or not, they're not going to agree. But like, I thought about Gabby Giffords. Like, what had Gabby Giffords ever done or said that was controversial?
Arizona congresswoman who nearly died in a shooting. Yeah.
Like, nothing at all. So, I mean, clearly, if you're a politician, if you're a former president, you've said or done some things that are going to, rile some folks up, particularly those people on the edge. We don't know a ton about this guy, but we know he had previous incidences. Probably not all
Yeah,
whatever.
I think that's fair to say based on what I've seen and heard so far.
Sorry for going in the generalities, but you see
mental health issues.
Yeah, mental health issue, right? And especially coming off a previous attempt, like it's not crazy to think that this would happen again. And I'm saying that from a security perspective is because you get the copycats, right? You have one person that attempts it and tries it, and other people who were thinking about it go, well, he tried it and he didn't succeed, so I'm going to try this thing too. Like, that's a real thing in law enforcement, copycat attacks. But you and I were talking about security a little bit earlier, and what I told you was, yes, as a security professional, I can make anything that we do pretty much 100% safe, but at what cost? Like, what is it going to take to make every environment you go in 100% safe? What are you willing to tolerate? And as it pertains to Trump, if he decides like, hey, I want to go golf, there's only so much time that you can take to secure all of those areas and secure the entire perimeter. And look, I'm sure these guys did an amazing job. We don't measure things by the result. Yeah, it is a little scary that someone was there for 12 hours, but I want you to go to any golf course in America right now and walk the fence line and see how, dude, I could camp out outside of Congressional Golf Course in DC right now for a month, as long as it wasn't around their tournament. And I'm pretty sure no one would say a word to me. So you see what I'm driving at. Like,
I do.
Look, like okay, it's an 18-hole golf course. Are you going to secure the entire perimeter? Like, no, you're going to do what happened. They saw something wrong. They responded to it. I'm not just going off the result. I mean, that's what they were there for. Great. They did good. He was never in any real danger.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it depends how you define real danger. He never got a shot off. He was 400 or 500 yards away.
Certainly better than what happened in Pennsylvania.
Yes,
how about that?
Absolutely. I think, look, I'm not a security expert, but I think two things can be true at the same time. It can be true that the Secret Service in this instance performed in the moment extremely well. I mean, the fact that this guy spotted the gun, fired at him before he even had a chance to get a shot off, like, they responded and did their job very well. At the same time, I think if they had it to do over again and going forward now, they will be patrolling the perimeter. I mean, there are lots of things you can do. You can put vehicles there. You can, but
dude, there's a million things you can do.
Right, part of the issue is money, as it is with everything in the world.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier.
Joe Biden said this actually Monday morning. He said the Secret Service needs help. They need funding, and they do. And I think what happened in Pennsylvania and what happened here shows you that they need enhanced security and they need more people, more vehicles, drones, equipment. They need all of it.
We're not talking about millions of dollars, Eric. If we really want to protect these people, we're talking about billions of dollars.
Well, look, I don't know what the price tag is, but Congress definitely needs to allocate more money. I think what's going to happen in the long term, and this is probably coming next year with whoever the new administration is, I think there will be an extensive top to bottom overhaul of the Secret Service. You've already seen leadership resignment. I think they're going to completely revamp this and basically, and they should, because you cannot have these kind of incidents. I want to be clear. This golf course incident, as we thought, was nowhere near the severity and the complete clusterfuck of Pennsylvania. But
I got to say, I'm a little taken aback. I think that's going to happen with the Secret Service and knowing what they do. A complete overhaul? That's an
I think it's going to be a complete overhaul. I think they're going to redo leadership. They're going to bring in new. They've already switched leadership. They're going to bring in all new people. I think they're going to expand the budget. Congress is going to give them
that
money.
Needs to happen, and they'll gladly take it.
The fact that it finally, we didn't get a lot of answers on the Pennsylvania thing at first. Finally, it came out last week in a report. I forget. I think it was the Washington Post. Maybe it was the New York Times, and it said that it was clearly determined that the Secret Service did not ask local law enforcement to secure that roof. There was never an ask. That roof in Pennsylvania that was 130 yards away from the president.
And heads should roll
with a clear right. And number two, in their joint command center in Pennsylvania that day, they did not have overall communication so that everyone could hear everyone else. So when local law enforcement was saying, hey, there's a guy on the roof, the people in the command center did not get that message. These are the details that are coming out.
I do. And I knew all of this, whatever. My larger point is what you and I have talked about on this thing before is like the way that these events occur, how much preparation time you have, the budget you have going into it, the personnel that you have going into it. Because ideally, why do I need multiple teams from 37 jurisdictions working on one event? Like, that's just stupid fundamentally. Like, when you think about it, wouldn't you want one entity to be responsible for an event and then operate that event? Like, yes, of course you would. But there's not enough money for that, dude. There's not enough time.
Of course.
And I know I'm saying I sound like I'm making an excuse, but like, yes, errors are going to occur when you have this bureaucracy involved, when you have this level of support that is required. Like, yeah, people are going to make mistakes. It happens. It's the biggest flaw in any security program, human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to depend. Look, no matter, even if you expand the budget, they're still going to need their local partners, as they should. The question is, how do they coordinate with them, and how when they have the command center, how is it that they don't set up the communication so that everybody can hear everybody? That was clearly that appears to be one of the key findings from the upcoming report about the major errors they made. I wanted to talk about Springfield, Ohio, Brian. This has gotten a lot of news. Obviously, Trump during the debate said they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, referring to the Haitian migrants. They made that into songs, and there's remixes online, which are pretty catchy. Sometimes I'll just be like, going about my day, and I'll be like, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets. But this is interesting because you and I, as I mentioned at the beginning, grew up in central Pennsylvania, specifically Altoona. Altoona's population at that time was around 50,000 people when we were growing up. I think it's much less than that now, or less.
When we were born, it was 80. So put that in perspective.
What?
Yes,
really?
1979,
buddy. God. Wow. But so 50, 60, there's a ton of towns like this in the Northeast and Midwest, all over the country. Springfield, Ohio, population about 60,000. There's roughly 15,000 Haitian migrants in that area. Now, that's causing a lot of problems, as you would expect, right? There's a strain on resources, medical, schools. They don't know the driving laws. They speak a different language. And that's a big deal. But I think and it's fair to point that out, and it's fair to ask, why didn't we have more resources available for them? But I think the thing that really bothers me about this, and the way Trump and Vance have tried to exploit this, is these are legal immigrants. The Haitians are here legally, and they are working. That's the reason they're in Springfield. Springfield did a smart thing years back. They had all this land. like a lot of towns, small towns, they had land, they had factories, and they said, you know what, let's try to revitalize our economy. And they wanted to bring in foreign workers to help make that happen. It worked. It worked too well. And they brought all these Haitians in legally because they were fleeing Haiti. They're here for humanitarian reasons. Haiti's in a disastrous situation with gangs basically running the country. And so these are the kind of immigrants that I thought Trump and many Republicans wanted, people who come here legally and are working and are contributing to the economy. Instead, it feels like kind of a cheap way to demonize immigrants as a whole, number one. But number two, I don't think it's an effective political strategy, because I think when you go so far as to latch on to apparently false claims, there's no evidence of any cats or dogs being eaten. It's crazy I even have to say that. There is evidence of a few geese. That is true. There is evidence of a few geese. That part is apparently true. But not cats, not dogs,
not your family pet,
unless someone has a pet goose. But my point is, I am with Trump to a large degree on the fact that the border has been chaotic and the Biden administration let it get out of control for a long time, and we didn't do enough to crack down on illegal immigration. But I cannot get on board with Trump because of the way that he then turns that into demonizing often legal immigrants who I think are part of what has made this country great over the years.
Well, this is one of my many, many issues with Donald Trump and also the Republican Party in their playbook when it comes to elections. It's basically pandering to white people that all of your problems and everything that's wrong is not because of you and not what you've done, but it is the fault of brown people. So I think this is just another example of that, Eric. Maybe hyperbolically, maybe even funny because of the songs and the memes, but I'm sure for the people in that town, not so much, and particularly not for the refugees who came here to America just wanting a better life, all doing the best that they can. Not that they're not going to have problems, not that there isn't going to, I mean, I made the joke with you earlier. If you parachuted my family into the middle of Afghanistan and were like, hey guys, assimilate, I don't know how well that would go in a much different way. But I don't know. Like I said, this is just something that I think is part of politics. It's part of the election. It's been part of the Republican playbook for years and years. Not that the Democrats don't have their faults, but I mean, it's just so gross, dude.
Well, it's so gross, and it's dumb tactically. It's overplaying your hand rather than focusing on the legitimate problems of illegal immigration to drill down on this. But the other thing too is it's just icky, and it's this country.
It almost seems lazy.
It is. It's like, look over there. We're going to deport these Haitians. And look, we assimilate and have over time incredibly well, which is our great strength. And I actually, on the other podcast you mentioned that I do, Everybody Settle Down.
What's the name of that again? Oh, that's right.
That's called Everybody Settle Down. So I was talking about this subject, and I read a part of Ronald Reagan's immigration speech in 1989, and I had never seen it until a few days ago. I'd heard about it. I heard people make reference to it, but if you haven't seen it, it's not very long. Google it or put it in YouTube. It's from 1989. It's just before he left office. It was the last speech he ever gave as president.
When he talked about dementia.
Well, he didn't look like
allegedly
it in the speech. I mean, he looked.
I'm kidding, man. Sorry,
he was still the great communicator, but he talked about immigrants and how important they were to this country. And he said, I'll just read one paragraph. It is bold men and women yearning for freedom and opportunity who leave their homelands and come to a new country to start their lives over. They believe in the American dream, and over they make it come true for themselves, for their children, and for others. They give more than they receive. They labor and succeed, and often they are entrepreneurs. But their greatest contribution is more than economic, because they understand in a special way how glorious it is to be an American. They renew our pride and gratitude in the United States of America, the greatest, freest nation in the world, the last best hope of man on earth. I mean, could you imagine Donald Trump saying anything like that? Like, how far has the Republican Party fallen in a generation that we've gone from Ronald Reagan to Donald Trump? It's just, I don't know. It says a lot about us. It says a lot about the Republican Party. But that was Ronald Reagan in 1989. By the way, he backed it up too. Like he signed a big immigration bill in
Yeah.
1986 that provided amnesty actually to a lot of people who had been here for a long time. But it's just, first of all, also, I wish politicians talked like that.
Yeah, we talked about that
Sometimes
before.
now.
I would give
mean,
anything for that speech right now.
it's so good. Yeah, go look it up. It's just, and so Trump apparently has said he's going to be there this week in Springfield, although I don't know if that's been officially confirmed yet. We'll see. We'll see exactly what message he delivers when he goes there. What do you think the odds are he'll avoid talking about eating dogs and cats?
0%.
Zero. I give him much more credit than you do. I'd say 5%.
I think
at least,
dude, at this point, you're already here. Like, what are we doing? Let's just go all in on this thing.
Go all in. Oh, I do want to ask you this too. Getting back to the assassination for a minute, because I forgot to mention this when we talked about it. The political rhetoric thing. We've had a lot of blowback in recent days. Trump has really leaned into this. He essentially said the reason I was shot at twice now is because of the rhetoric from Biden and Harris.
He should say that. That's smart.
Yeah.
But that's not why. Why do you think I pointed out Gabby Giffords at the very beginning? Because I had the same thought you did.
The congressional baseball game with Steve Scalise. You had Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, beaten when the guy was looking for Nancy Pelosi. We either
accept that emotionally disturbed persons and gun violence are part of our culture and that we will have these type of events, or we don't. But largely we have accepted it. I don't think that the fact that there's been 2 attempts on Trump's life and none on the Democratic side mean anything. I think if anyone had a clue of how many death threats, legitimate or otherwise, there were towards Barack Obama for a wide variety of reasons. Listen, I can't pull the stats up, but I guarantee you that Barack Obama had infinitely more threats against his life than Donald Trump. I guarantee you.
And look, I want to be clear. I think political rhetoric is a part of it. It's not the only thing. As you mentioned, there are other factors. Our politics has become toxic.
Yeah.
And the tribalism, the algorithms, the silos we live in, and some of the rhetoric does play into that. And it is some of the rhetoric of politicians, I think, goes too far, especially when the left calls him Hitler and some of those things, or misconstrues.
But I don't want to get into the blame game. That's what I'm saying.
Right, but I want to be clear. I think to only put that on the left is the problem I have. Because remember, Trump gives as good as, and I would say more than he receives. And
what about Pelosi's husband being hit in the head with a hammer?
Well, and Trump mocked that, as did many conservatives. They mocked that, said it was some type of sex thing. Do you remember that? That was the joke for a while, that it was a sex thing because they were found he was in his underwear.
This specific case, though, because that's the way you brought up the question. I don't believe that rhetoric is specific in this case to why these attacks on Trump's life have taken place.
You might be right. Yeah, I don't know. Well, it's too early to know that, I think. The guy clearly had problems with Trump, but we don't know if that was, we don't know exactly what fueled that, right? He was clearly disturbed mentally. He was obsessed with the war in Ukraine and very against Trump for his perceived opposition to the war in Ukraine, or at least continuing that war. So there was a lot going on there. But I'm talking about the broader point of our political discourse, not so much this specific incident. And I just think everybody needs to tone it down a little bit. I agree with that. But I just think it's a little rich coming from Trump. Also, one thing I really take exception to that he said is the threat to democracy thing. That is some type of illegitimate slander that is putting him in danger. Look, it's just true. Now, what kind of threat he is, how big of a threat he is, how that threat may manifest itself, that is totally a legitimate subject for debate. But as Dick Cheney said, when he endorsed Kamala Harris the other day, which is kind of a shocking development on his own, Donald Trump should never be trusted with power, can never be trusted with power again, based on what he did. I mean, the man tried,
Dick Cheney, but okay.
Well, the man tried to overturn an election. And when you do that, you are, by definition, a threat to democracy.
It's such hyperbole. John Hinckley shot Ronald Reagan to try and marry Jodie Foster. We all need to calm down. Like, sometimes things that people that are attempting to take the life of some of the most well-protected people in the world, they're not always all there, man. That's all I'm saying.
They'll find an excuse, is basically
this isn't
what
Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King did not have Secret Service protection. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
just it's I'm not articulating it well, but I think you get what I'm saying.
So you're saying you're saying you think the rhetoric has gotten pretty severe, but you don't think that's necessarily tied
I do
specifically
not.
to these attempts.
I
Gotcha.
don't.
What about the thing about calling him Hitler and that kind of stuff? That's all out of bounds, right? I mean, can we, whether it affects people, crazy people or not, can we not do that? Can
Well,
we
we
just
should
not
do that in
call
any case
anybody
as we
Hitler?
talk about anything. And as
Right.
you and I have discussed on this very program, when Nazi Germany and Adolf Hitler are brought up, the conversation has come to an end and it needs to
Well,
just be
yes.
over.
It needs to
Because
just
I get
stop.
like I can't wrap my mind around it. Like it's
Yeah.
and plus, not to be weird about it, man. Like I think about the Holocaust and I'm like, what are we doing? Like I think we're detached from reality when we try and connect those things. But
Yeah.
I'm taking the easy side here. I realize that. But it's so abhorrent, it's absurd.
All right, Brian, let's turn to the world of sports on a lighter note. The NFL through 2 weeks now, our Steelers are 2-0 among the I don't, surprises, I guess you'd say, with
Yeah.
Justin Fields leading the way. You have any thoughts about the NFL so far? What has jumped out at you in the early going?
How much teams have made it a point to really take care of the football? I think it has constipated a lot of the offenses. You
Oh, no,
mentioned the
that's
Steelers who
nice
are
use of constipation, by the way.
yeah, the Steelers who are 2-0, those haven't been particularly fun football games to
No.
watch, by any stretch of the imagination. As a sports fan, I enjoy watching sports, and I really think what's happened in the NFL over the last, oh, I don't know, maybe 15 years, because I associate a lot of it with Aaron Rodgers. I think Aaron Rodgers was the first quarterback who showed that you could still make big plays downfield and take care of the football at the same time, kind of like the anti Brett Favre. But anyway, what I'm driving at is that teams are so terrified of turning over the football that they're not trying to make the explosive plays. That's number one. Number two for me has been Baker Mayfield is a big one. Um, who's the quarterback out in Seattle? I can never remember his name. Played at West Virginia, was drafted by the Jets.
Oh, that would be Geno Smith.
Geno Smith. And another guy people forgot about, Kyler Murray, like who was just kind of like dead and buried. And by the way, all
Yeah.
those guys were kind of relegated. Derek Carr in New Orleans because they made too many turnovers. And
Yeah.
here they are at the beginning of the season. I mean, the highest rated quarterbacks in the NFL are the guys that I just mentioned, Derek Carr and
And
Baker
Fields
Mayfield.
for our Steelers 2-0 as
Well,
well. Yeah.
I mean, he hasn't exactly tossed the pill around
No.
the ball yard, but
He
those are
hasn't
probably
turned
the
it
things
over
that
though.
have stood out the most to me. Has been number one, teams not taking a lot of chances, and number two, guys that were severely turnover. Sam Darnold, 2-0 for the Minnesota Vikings. So,
Yeah.
like these guys that I mentioned who are not the cream of the crop. And meanwhile, Lamar Jackson, two-time MVP, 0-2. Patrick Mahomes, 3 turnovers in 2 games, 1-1. Jalen Hurts, who's a very good quarterback, Philadelphia Eagles, 1-1. It's been, I mean,
Oh no,
like, look,
the Chief. I know that it swung late, but the Chiefs won that game. They're
oh,
2-0.
I apologize. But Mahomes is turning the ball over, and I
Yes.
believe he only passed for like 160 yards or something crazy,
I,
which for him is not, that's like a quarter usually.
I'm glad you talked about that because that is the story through 2 weeks. Is the completely different way the NFL looks now than it
Oh, really?
has in
That's a
recent
story?
past. Like I saw the stat the other day. I was stunned by this. Touchdown passes through 2 weeks. It is down nearly 50%. It's like a 40% drop from a few years ago. Now, who knows if that will continue, but that just speaks to what you're talking about. Teams are running the ball a lot.
Yeah.
And they're not throwing it deep down the field. Everything is short. In fact, so far through 2 weeks, there's only 4 quarterbacks in the whole league that have 4 or more touchdown passes. Kyler Murray and Darnold, who you mentioned, have 4 each, and Carr and Mayfield, who you mentioned, have 5. It is incredibly conservative around the league right now. Now, maybe that'll change as teams get more comfortable, but it really is almost a different game than it has been in recent years, where the trend for a lot, like when we were growing up, teams ran the ball a decent amount. And then it switched to
Passing all the time.
60, 70% of the time. And now we're going back toward more balance, and there's still a lot of passing, but it's so much concentrated in with short passes.
I think teams have figured out, and very smart people who go to very fancy schools who now work in NFL front offices have figured out that the margins of these athletes and of these guys is so small that the one of the areas where you do have some control is in how much you turn the ball over. So if you're not taking as many risks downfield, if you're running the ball more, you're doing those type of things, you're turning the ball over less, that is something that you can actually control. And if it gives you just 1-2%, not to make this an election thing, like that could be the difference between being in the playoffs and being out of the playoffs. I still don't think it matters on the highest end when you talk about the Chiefs. It doesn't matter on the lowest end when you talk about the Carolina Panthers. But I think in the middle, where, 90% of teams are. What's the difference between the Raiders and the Eagles? Think about it, man.
Yeah.
Like, we all think the Eagles are going to the playoffs. We all think the Raiders stink. Dude, I don't know. Some of those guys
almost no difference.
There's no difference. That's my point.
Right.
So where can the Raiders make up that little gap with Gardner Minshew?
Yeah.
It's hard. They do have Devontae Adams. He's decent, but you get what I'm saying.
Absolutely. And as Steeler fans, with especially under Mike Tomlin and under Cowher too, we've been doing that before it was cool.
Oh, yeah,
that's
since the
been
90s.
The Steelers philosophy forever. So Tomlin is totally at home with this. And as you said, the Steelers have had 18 points and 13 points in their 2 games, and they've won both games.
Exactly.
They scored 1 touchdown in 2 games, and they've won them both.
They also have TJ Watt, which helps
true.
a tremendous.
He's a game. Yes, he's a game wrecker, TJ Watt. All right, it's kind of old news now, but we didn't get a chance to talk about it last week. The Tyreek Hill interaction with police. And I'm sure people remember this from last week. It was a huge story. He got pulled over on his way to the game. The video has been out there, the body cam video. He wouldn't cooperate initially. He rolled his window up, a tinted window. The officers took exception to that. They pulled him out, got slightly rough with him. It's not like they beat him up, but they did force him to the ground, handcuffed him, and then forced him to sit down. He has said, to his credit, that he didn't handle the situation as well as he could have, but he's also said that he wants the officer fired who was involved in that. As we mentioned, your background, you are not just a security guy. You literally were a military policeman in the U.S. You have pulled people over in your life. So what did you think of this?
And well, not only that, I think I should mention as part of the segment, I have taught the use of force to police officers, given them training in the academy. So when they go out in the street, I'm the guy they're looking to tell them what to do. So the most often cited Supreme Court case, and this was done a lot with Derek Chauvin and George Floyd, is Graham versus Connor. Are you familiar with Graham versus Connor?
I don't know. I don't think so. Which one was that?
Graham versus Connor is a U.S. Supreme Court case that basically establishes the reasonableness standard, which says that you can only act with the information that you have in front of you at the time. And more to the point, would another officer in a similar set of circumstances do something that was similar? That's what that case generally established. So let's talk about the reasonableness standard in this case. You're on patrol outside of an NFL football game, and an African-American in a vehicle that probably cost $1 million is going 20 miles over the speed limit. Gee, I wonder who could be driving that car. That's going to be really hard to figure out what's happening. Oh my God, he's being non-compliant. Dude, I'm just going to cut this off short and say that that officer is out of his mind. In this current state, with what we have, what is he fucking doing? You're crazy. If I would have pulled over Tariq Hill and been like, hey, dude, you're going a little fast. You want to give me an autograph for my kids? Hey, slow down. Next time you're outside here, just be careful. You went 20 miles over the limit. And I would have said, hey, man, have a great game. Hope you score a touchdown. Because are you serious? What are we doing?
I don't know. Somebody did say, hey, that's one of the Dolphins receivers later in the interaction. I don't know if the officers initially knew that.
Then he's a moron, because every officer who is working that beat on that day at that place knows exactly what's going on, which is why I led the way I did. There aren't very many other officers. I'm telling you, I would not have reacted that way. Not because what the guy did was wrong, because I've done security details for all types of things. What are you talking about? If I see Bruce Springsteen or John Bon Jovi coming up to his concert event, what do you think I'm going to do?
Right.
Let me give a more like basic example, right? Is like, so if you've ever done like stadium security, dude, people in the parking lot are doing all kinds of crazy shit. You know what I mean? They're doing nitrous, they're smoking weed, they're having fun, they're doing whatever they're doing. If I just pick out a random group of people and I started beating them with my PR-24, like that's not reasonable. People wouldn't do that. That's not part of the security detail. It's not why you're there. And what I'm saying is I'm not saying Tariq Hill did the right thing. What I'm saying is it's very clear to me that this officer is 100% out of line. And dude, I support law enforcement all the time, probably. And if people would listen to this more on the show, they would know, dude, more times than not, I take the side of law enforcement, but I'm not going to defend this guy's actions. He escalated a situation that could have been very easily de-escalated, and everyone could have moved on with their day. No, regardless of how Tariq Hill acted.
Devil's advocate, because here's the thing I think that really set him off, and I can kind of understand this from an officer's perspective. The window. When you roll up a tinted window, that poses a threat to law enforcement, right? Now, I know what you're saying. You should assume that's an athlete in there who's probably not going to do anything.
No, you shouldn't assume that. You should fucking know that.
But let's just say that you pulled over somebody, a random individual, and that person was non-compliant and rolled up a window and wouldn't turn it down.
Different. I know. This is why I love it. It's not.
It's not the same. I understand.
Because when you make that application, that is a different set of circumstances and a different set of facts. It is not this thing that we're talking about.
So how should he reacted when he did the window? Are you saying he should have just accepted Tyreek Hill being non-compliant, wrote him the ticket, and then said and knocked on the window?
No,
and said, okay, roll it down.
Instead of being aggressive, he should have de-escalated it. That's all I'm saying. He could have very easily de-escalated that situation. There was no reason for him to be in handcuffs. There was no reason for him to be on the ground. There was certainly no reason to put Calais Campbell in handcuffs.
Yes,
when he came over to support the situation. Yes. Dude, this is incompetence run amok times 1,000. Like, I can't be more clear on that. If I was the sergeant or the lieutenant of those people, I would have showed up there and just started reaming people immediately. Like, what are you doing?
What about pulling him out of the car? That is a little to be. So he won't roll the window
because 20 miles an hour over the window down. Eric, you have to understand.
So what do you do?
No, but
you just let him go. If he won't roll the window down, what do you do? If he refuses to comply and won't roll the window down, what is your?
But he did. That's not what happened.
I thought that was what happened. From my watching of the video, he appeared to initially cooperate and then said, basically, I'm out.
But why did he do that?
And rolled the window up. I don't know why he did it. I don't know. I don't know. That's why I think he said I could have handled it better, because I think he knows he shouldn't have done that.
No, he's not wrong. Look, I mean, if you're not Tyreek Hill and you have an interaction with law enforcement, I would strongly advise you to comply under all circumstances. And I will apply this to myself, who has been pulled over on multiple occasions for various infractions. And I have both hands on the steering wheel and I say, yes, sir, no, sir, the entire time.
Of course you do. All right, Brian, let's turn to the entertainment section of the program. What have you been watching recently?
But all right.
Do you have any reviews, TV, movies? Have you been watching anything recently?
So I watched Suits, which I know is an old show. I gave up on Suits.
Oh my God.
I did.
Suits is the what's
USA
her name? The princess,
and Meghan
right?
Markle.
Meghan Markle, yes.
I got to say, Meghan Markle, not unattractive. I can see why she is the Duchess of Sussex, my friend. Actually, all kidding aside, I had no idea she was an actress. I knew she was on the show.
Are you serious? How did you not know that? You did not know
I don't know all
Markle
kinds of
was
things.
An actress.
No, I knew that Meghan Markle was on a show, but I didn't know it was Suits necessarily.
Gotcha.
And then I watched Suits and I saw her on there. And I told my wife immediately, almost embarrassingly, I was like, I can see why she's a princess.
Can I stop here? I have some questions.
Okay.
So first question.
Yes.
There are so many great shows, like current shows that some I've told you about. Shogun, which just won the Emmy for best drama. this year, a great show. Ripley, I've told you about, which is outstanding. The Bear, so good.
Yeah.
And you haven't seen any of
Yeah.
these shows, and we know you're wealthy and you
Yeah.
subscribe to all the streaming
I have them
services.
all.
So you have them at you, but yet you chose a, what is it, decade-old
Yes.
show that was on
Yes.
USA Network and is now what, on Netflix?
It's on
And you
Netflix.
decided that would be what you would devote your time to. That's like Tyreek Hill rolling up the window.
You know, when you
don't
frame it this way, it's very hard for me to defend myself.
It's indefensible. You have no defense.
Stop it. Now you're being unfair to Suits. Okay. Louis Litt is the Cosmo Kramer of this show, and I'm enjoying every moment of it.
So how far into the show are you?
I'm 3 seasons in.
3 seasons. How many seasons are there?
There's 9.
Are you going to stick it out?
I don't think so. And the reason is, in fairness, because it's a bit redundant. Like, I think by season 3, they were like, this works. Let's just keep doing that over and over and over again.
I just think that this is hilarious that you have at your disposal a library of current and
literally
classic.
Every show ever made anywhere.
Yes. And including many current shows that have aired within the last few years that are excellent programs that you would probably really enjoy. And you chose a 9-season show.
So no,
decade old that you're not even going to finish.
Hold on a second. Okay, your criticism is understood and appreciated. However, let me defend myself a little bit here.
Okay.
The other show I was considering starting was Dexter. And again, it's a decades old show, you know, whatever. But here's why, because it's completed. I can watch Dexter from episode 1 to the very final episode, and I can see them all. And I'm not going to hit a gap. I'm not going to hit a bump. I'm not going to have to wait to see what happened. I can watch them all at one time and enjoy it and see it straight through. So to answer your question, that's genuinely why I chose a series that was already completed, because I just wanted to do something where I wasn't going to have to wait a year. Or in the case of like the House of Dragon, I mean, maybe 2 years before season 3 comes out. So that was the reason why.
I got you. I would say Ripley then is what you should do. That's a limited series that aired on Netflix earlier this year. That's one and done. And Shogun, they thought originally might be one and done, but now they're saying because of its success, and of course, if you saw the Emmys the other night, it won like I think a record 18 Emmys, including Best Drama Series. I think it's going to come back now for a second season, but it was very self-contained that one season. But so Shogun, people should check that out if they haven't. I've talked about it before.
Yeah.
I watched it months ago. It's really good. I think I gave it an 8 out of 10. Set in. I didn't know that I would. It's a credit to how good it is and how well done, well made it is that a show about Japan in the Middle Ages, that's subtitled, where they like where they focus in on a lot of the minutia of the Japanese culture and like poetry and honor and there is some, you know, pretty badass samurai stuff too. But that kind of show would pull you in. It's really good. I mean, it's really well done. So I highly recommend it. Brian, now it's your chance to make fun of me, though, because between the Olympics and the conventions, you know, I'm a political nerd, and then the NFL, the start of football season, the only thing that I have really watched in the last like 2 months besides those things is the latest season of Selling Sunset on Netflix.
Of course it is.
My wife and I just completed season 8. Let me tell you, man, I've said this before.
Let me tell you, it's such a great show. It's so well done. It won an Emmy.
Well, I don't. Selling Sunset, I do not believe won any Emmys. Look,
it should.
It's trashy reality television, but nobody does trashy reality TV like Netflix. And Selling Sunset in particular, yes, there is the element of the catty drama of the people in the office. You have that kind of Real Housewives of whatever drama. But what sells it to me is it's real estate porn. It takes place it's about a real estate firm here in Southern California, near where I live, and all the different areas and the homes. It's incredible. I mean, it's like HGTV, but for these multi-million-dollar mansions. So that alone makes it a good watch to me, but it is really well done. It's well made. My wife really likes it. So it's kind of a bonding. It's in that Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Of things we can watch together, which doesn't include a lot of stuff. So when there is something,
She doesn't love football.
No, well, and she doesn't like a lot of the shows I like. Like she was not in on
Shogun,
Shogun
The Bear.
or she's not really in on The Bear. But she's more of like a romantic, she's more of like a Bridgerton person, you know, in reality shows. So, but I can't do Bridgerton, but I can do Selling Sunset. So I actually would recommend it. And it's an easy watch. They're like 30-minute episodes, you know. It's very it's and the homes are just
I feel
incredible.
like I don't even need to say anything. Like, you just know
yes,
where I'm gonna go. I mean, but you know what? At the same time, look, I'm the kind of guy that when I see someone that's happy, I'm like Tony Soprano. I salute, good for you. Like,
you're
you know
not
what I
gonna
mean?
you're not gonna yuck my yum.
No, no, dude. If you like it, good for you, man. Like, go for it.
All right, I appreciate that. Do you have any? So now that you're going to bail on Suits, is there anything on the horizon, or have you not decided yet what's next?
I've been watching a lot of Turning Point on Netflix. I'm currently doing
Oh, what is?
the
I'm not
Cold
familiar
War.
with that show. What is that?
Well, Turning Point, I watched the 9/11 documentary. It kind of went through the last 20 years and predominantly the Afghan War. I finished that one today, and I'm currently on the Cold War and the current war on Ukraine and Russia.
Ooh, nice.
Turning Point leans very left. I'm going to be clear about that. It really does, particularly when they covered 9/11. I didn't find it like offensive, but I was like, okay, you have an agenda.
Right.
You know, like that kind of thing. Like, I get what you're driving at. It doesn't make what they're saying factually untrue. It just kind of makes it so you skipped over some very important things that would have, you know, not made your point. But I am interested in watching the one on Russia and Ukraine. I'm fascinated by Russia just in general. It's a place in the world I've always wanted to go. This is a weird
I would
thing.
advise again. I would advise
No.
that.
Like, dude, I don't want to be weird about it. I can't go because I would be arrested immediately. Like, I'm not even joking.
Because of your military
yeah,
background.
there's no way.
They'd be like,
hell.
this Putin would see you walk through. He'd be like,
dude,
get that guy. We could trade him.
And that's not like, I'm not even being weird about it. Like, that's a legitimate thing that like people have told me when I say like, I really want to go to Russia because Russia has such a unique history in the world. I think kind of being like the bastard child of Europe. That's such a I don't know, a unique, neat thing over history and kind of their culture and why they are the way they are. I've always wanted to go there, so I'm excited to watch the rest of the Turning Point as it applies to the Cold War. I think the other interesting point, and you know, this is not part of the show, but I was thinking about it today, how like when we were kids and the Cold War was covered, you know, it was kind of like good versus evil. And it was the same thing with 9/11, like good versus evil. Like they just painted with this broad brush. So to get into the nuance of kind of, you know, capitalism versus communism and the Russian people and America and how all of this came to be and kind of leading to Putin. And what I'm most interested in is what has established Putin's worldview and kind of why he's doing the things that he's doing. I don't know. I mean, that's neat to learn about. So yeah, whatever. I'm a nerd. That's what I'm watching right now.
All right. Well, when you're done with that, please watch a decent show that has been produced in the last, like, I don't know, 5 years.
This was produced in the last 5 years.
Just check out Shogun. All right. For the love of God. All right, Brian, do you have any final thoughts today?
Do I have any final thoughts today? Well, you're out in LA. Do you think Shohei's going to get to 50-50?
Ooh, I don't know. What's he at? 46,
47.
46?
46, 47.
How many games does he have left?
Like 13. It's going to be close. It's exciting. Are you excited for baseball at all?
No, I
You
can't get into baseball anymore. As I've gotten older, it's so funny because my career, large part of it, most of it was in sports, radio, play-by-play, sports talk. But at this point in my life, the only sport I really care about is the NFL. I'll watch some college football here or there.
Penn State.
For baseball, yeah, I'll watch a little bit of college football, a little bit of Penn State. I'll watch the playoffs in baseball. I will watch like a little bit here or there. I'm not going to sit through a whole game. And then the NBA, I do like the NBA playoffs, but that's pretty much it. That's where I am with sports right now, man. It has to, you know, as you get older in life too, it's kind of like my show curation. I'll only watch trashy reality shows or like shows that I think are really good. There's no in between for me. Like I'm not wasting time on Suits. You know what I mean?
I know, I get you.
Like
I'm just
the
thinking
clock's
with
ticking. I'm
baseball.
getting older.
I went to the Phillies Mets game on Saturday, and Bryce Harper hit 2 home runs, and I was there with my family, and I'm high-fiving my son, and the Phillies fans are making fun of Acuna, who was in his first major league game, and I was like, I was in heaven, dude. It's like if I die, I'm gonna be in Iowa in the corn stalks like that. Like it's just I love baseball so much, man.
By the way,
yeah.
R.I.P. James Earl Jones. Who
Oh,
died
Darth
last
Vader.
week. Yeah,
Which I know he was a million other things, but
I was talking about specifically your reference in Field of Dreams, the cornfields in Iowa. Remember him in that movie? He gives that speech about baseball. Baseball, Roy.
Well, he was in Sandlot too, which is another baseball movie.
Oh yeah,
he's the blind guy in Sandlot.
He gives that great speech.
But wouldn't you say that James Earl Jones was best known either Apocalypse Now or Darth Vader?
Darth Vader, yeah, and also this is CNN. You know, he's the voice of that.
Yeah.
When if you ever watch CNN, but I think Field of Dreams, because in Star Wars you couldn't see his face. Field of Dreams, I think maybe his most iconic role. I mean, that speech he gives about baseball, they still play that all the time. Baseball, Roy. It binds us through the ages. I mean, it's just like that
train that keeps on moving, man. I love it. No, I post that on my stupid Facebook page every year at the start of baseball season because like I want people to enjoy baseball as much as I do. I know you're never going to get into it, but
I'll get into
the Dodgers out there, man.
I know.
How have you not been to a Dodgers game?
I still have not been to a game. I was at a Dodger game, but not since I moved to LA. I do need to go. Next year, I will get to a game next year. The tickets for the playoffs are probably going to be outrageous, so I probably won't
don't
go
do
there.
that.
But I will watch some of the playoffs on TV, so we can talk about it when we get to the playoffs because I know you would enjoy that. All right, thank you so much for being with us today. For Brian Johnson, I'm Eric Messersmith. We hope that you enjoyed the show, but if not, please take no offense.